Hello, I'm Paige Wooden with the American Geophysical Union. My poster this year at SSP is on identifying potential biases through the contributor role taxonomy, or CRediT. In 2017, the American Geophysical Union implemented CRediT for 21 journals. CRediT consists of 14 ways that authors contribute to the research and writing of the manuscript. So some specific details of AGU's implementation where the corresponding author selects the roles on behalf of all co-authors. It's currently required for 3 AGU journals, but only 2 require it during the period that I analyzed, 2021 and 2022. In the period analyzed, the non-corresponding authors were not notified of the roles assigned to them. However, more recently, AGU started notifying non-corresponding authors of the roles that the corresponding author assigned at submission. The uptake of CRediT across all AGU journals has increased from 45% of submissions in 2019 to 60% in 2022. So this poster analyzes the adoption of CRediT in AGU journal submissions with submit date in 2021 and 2022, looking at author team size, CRediT roles assigned by geographical region and gender. And it discusses ways to improve the implementation and uptake of the CRediT taxonomy and identifies some ways we can potentially decrease potential biases in the system. These are the 14 roles in the taxonomy. So the results show this graph that as author team size increases, there is a slight trend downward in the use of CRediT. It is very slight, as you can see from the dotted line. We also can see that submissions with one author are less likely to use the CRediT taxonomy than submissions with more than one author. So these graphs show the distribution of the number of contributions by author gender. The first plot shows first authors, and the second plot shows number of contributions of non-first authors by gender. We see that male first authors have slightly higher median roles than female first authors. Men and women's averages are very close. Men with 7.75 roles per person, and women with 7.43 per person on average. First authors with unknown gender have much lower median and average number of roles than those with known gender. Male and female non-first authors have very similar median and average number of roles. Non-first authors with unknown gender have the same median and lower average number of roles than those with known gender. These box and whisker plots show the distribution of roles by author region. The first shows first author region, and the second shows non-first author region. So for first authors, the average number of roles of China-based first authors is much lower than those from all other regions. Median number of roles of first authors in Mexico, Central and South America, and rest of Asia have slightly lower than authors in the rest of the regions except for China. Average and median number of roles of non-first authors are similar across all regions, except China is much lower. Here we see the percentage of male and female first authors with each role assigned. The percentage is of all male and female first authors on papers that use the CRediT taxonomy. So it doesn't include authors that didn't use the CRediT taxonomy. So the role with the largest difference by gender is software, with male first authors contributing 10% more often than female first authors. That's the difference here, is 10% between these two bars. Female first authors more often than men contributed to formal analysis and data curation. And that's represented with the $sign. Male first authors more often contributed than women to conceptualization, software, validation, resources, supervision, and project administration. Though it's not shown, the difference between men and women in the roles assigned were much smaller. The difference was much smaller among non-first authors. So there are larger differences by gender when we look at first authors than when we look at the rest of the authors. Here, we see the proportion of authors with each role assigned. So for example, what you're seeing is about 75% of first authors contributed to the role of conceptualization, and a little under 60% of second authors contributed to the role. So as we can see from the high spikes in first author and then the descending after second and later authors, the first authors was assigned roles more often than the second and later authors, though there are exceptions, and I want to point those out. One is resources, where the second author more often contributed resources than any other position, but the percentages are all pretty similar. Writing, the reviewing and editing writing type, we see that the second, third, fourth, fifth authors contributed more often than the first authors contributed. Supervision, second author most often contributed to this role, and then third, fourth, and fifth compared to the first author. Project administration and funding acquisition as well. The second author was more likely to contribute to these roles than the first author. Okay, here's some conclusions and discussions and suggested actions from this data. But I encourage you to use this data and your own data to make additional conclusions and suggested actions that are relevant to your organization. So AGU journals have seen an increased uptake in the use of CRediT, and which is an indicator that the scientific community finds it useful. CRediT use is smallest with solo authors, and publishers should consider making it optional for solo authors, or explain why it's important that solo authors declare their roles and their contributions. We also saw that as author team size increases, author teams are slightly less likely to use CRediT, but it's important to use especially as author team size increases. Publishers could investigate ways to make it easier for large author teams to provide author roles. Though there isn't a large difference between male and female first authors in the average or distribution of number of roles, it is important to continue tracking this and communicating these numbers to increase awareness and decrease the potential for unconscious bias. China-based authors assign themselves the fewest roles. We should do more to understand why this is and to understand any inequities in our systems that may perpetuate this difference. So my suggestion here, NISO and publishers should consider translating the roles and the definitions into other languages, especially Chinese, and to promote the use of CRediT in multiple languages. Differences in role by gender are apparent, with men more often contributing conceptualization, software validation, resources supervision, project admin, and funding acquisition. Women more often contribute to form analysis and data curation. If publishers are able, they should communicate these trends so that authors, funders, and institutions can be aware of potential biases in the role or task assignment within specific research projects, and also as you're considering what the authors actually did. Maybe that might help to think of ways that men and women contributed. Some roles are more common among non-first authors than among first authors. So authors should be reminded of the author policy to ensure that only those that met the policy criteria are included as authors. So for example, some roles such as funding acquisition or resources, if an author only contributed to either of those roles, they might not meet the authorship criteria established by your journals. So publishers should monitor these incidences and educate authors accordingly. Thank you.